This is the ASICS Sonicblast. It uses brand new materials in a design that reminds me of shoes from the ASICS archive. So is this shoe a blast from the past, or is it a portal to the future? It's time to lace up the Sonicblast and take it for a run. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kofuzi and I'm a non-elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys all about the ASICS Sonicblast. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that ASICS sent to me for the purpose of review, so I didn't have to pay for these shoes. However, nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their brand in this video, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the ASICS Sonicblast, and let's start with the specs. This is a 46mm stack height shoe, 1 millimeter shorter, 45 for the women's version, but both men's and women's get an 8mm drop, meaning for the men, there's 38mm of stack height in their forefoot. And there is a lot going on in this shoe. On the top layer, we see ASICS new FF Turbo Squared midsole foam, which is the same type of ATPU midsole foam that we saw in the ASICS Mega Blast that I recently reviewed. And underneath that, there is a layer of FF Blast Max. That's the same kind of daily training foam that we saw in the Nova Blast, which has been perennially one of my favorite daily trainers on the market. Now, in between these two layers of foam, there is this little window on the side of the shoe and then on the bottom of the shoe as well, where you could see this gray P-Bax plate. Everything, of course, has to be branded. So ASICS is calling this an Astro plate, and it is a 3/4 length design in more about teardrop shape in the forefoot rather than the kind of full plate design that we might see in a carbon plated shoe. There is a very aggressive rocker up at the front end of the shoe, and I think with the inclusion of this Astro plate in here, it's a rocker that isn't going to really deflect a lot. It's going to keep this shape, and that stiff rocker in the front of the shoe definitely reminds me of the old Evo Ride. I don't know if anyone had a chance to run in those shoes, which that shoe also reminded me of the Magic Speed version 1, which had basically the same kind of forefoot design where it was a very rigid rocker in the forefoot. Now, protecting all of this midsole foam and technology that's in the shoe on the bottom is a bunch of ASICS grip that is ASICS tackiest and stickiest of outsole materials. ASICS is really responding to what is typically one of the loudest complaints about the Nova Blast, in that it lacks a little bit in the grip department. I've never really had a problem with the grip on the Nova Blast, but for those of you who had, ASICS is trying to address those concerns with the ASICS grip material that's on here. There is some exposed foam here, and then there is that window to help you see that Astro plate. There is also a little bit of a cutout on the outer skid of rubber that's in the back of the shoe. And whenever a brand is doing that, I believe the reason why they do that is so that way the foam has more area to compress into without the kind of like constriction or the encapsulation of that foam by rubber on the outsole. So I think this is a signal that this is a shoe that may be intended for someone that's going to be doing a little bit more striking in the heel. Moving to the upper, we have a Checkered mesh or a Checkered mesh, depending on however it is that you pronounce that word. It is a strong yet thin material that is pretty breathable as well. There's a very thin tongue in the Sonicblast and not a lot of padding through the heel cup, which is generally what I like to see. There is some structure back here though, so it's not the floppiest of heels, and you're basically sitting inside a seat of this FF Turbo Squared foam as well. So all that is designed to kind of keep everything from sliding around too much. I went with my usual running shoe size, and that worked out really well for me. The fit on this shoe is a little bit more on the generous side for this type of shoe, but I didn't feel like it was too big. I felt like it had a comfortable amount of room in this shoe. Altogether, this shoe comes in a bit on the heavy side for what I think this shoe is supposed to be used for. It comes in at a stated weight of 9 ounces or 256 grams. Mine came in a little bit higher on my scale at a measured weight of 260 grams. Now that we talked about what this shoe is like on paper, let's talk about what it's like on the road. For some of you, the Sonicblast is going to be the Nova Blast with a plate that you've all been asking for years. But for me, the Sonicblast just isn't it. And I think a lot of it is going to be because I think the Sonicblast is designed for a runner who runs differently and likes different things in their shoes than what I like. And it's a little bit confusing to me that I don't absolutely love this shoe, because on paper, I should be enthralled with it. I love FF Turbo Squared. I thought it was fantastic in the Mega Blast. I love FF Blast Max. I think it's fantastic in both the Glide Ride Max and also in the Nova Blast version 5. And I also love it when ASICS puts very little padding in the back of the heel cup. So there's a lot of things going on here separately that I enjoy from ASICS, but put together, there's something happening on the downstep in this shoe that feels like it's just not releasing as quickly as I would like it to. And I think that part of it is going to be because of the way that they're using the plate in here. The fact that it's a 3/4 plate isn't necessarily a problem for me, but the fact that they've gone to the trouble of making a little window on the side to show you kind of that there is a little bit of a wing to the side of the plate indicates to me that the plate there is more designed for stability and stabilizing the foams than it is for the kind of propulsion that I would normally think about when I'm thinking about, say, carbon fiber plates. And so the experience that I'm feeling from this as I have all three of those things interacting together is that there is a very pleasant softness that happens on impact, but it also feels like something's kind of pulling down the shoe and holding on to it a little bit longer before it lets it release as I'm pushing off into the next stride. So it kind of feels like the shoe is pulling on me a little bit on that downstep, and it leads to a feeling of sluggishness. When I tried to run faster in this shoe, I found the bounciness of the overall experience to be nice. That FF Turbo Squared, there's a lot of it in here and it does feel good, but I think that the overall weight of the shoe and the kind of lagginess in the response time of the foam just wasn't quite quick enough when I slowed it down and just ran in the shoe as a daily trainer, running easy effort paces in it. That's where I felt like the shoe was really nice. The FF Turbo Squared was nice. The FF Blast Max was also enjoyable. But anytime I veered away from kind of easy efforts in the shoe, that's where I think some of the disconnect in terms of the way my foot hits the ground and the runner for whom this shoe is designed, kind of that conflict starts to become apparent. And I think the first clue on why this shoe doesn't really work for me comes from that little cutout that's in the back of the shoe here. I think that ASICS puts this little cutout in the heel of the rubber outsole when they are intending for that shoe to be more of a heel striker shoe or a midfoot to heel striker shoe. And then the rigidity of that rocker up front, again, reinforces to me the idea that this is a shoe that's supposed to be rolled through and pushed off of rather than landed on in the front and then pushed off of, which is normally how I would like to run in a shoe. So for me, what I'm feeling is that the shoe feels to be a little bit cumbersome. It's fighting me when I'm trying to run faster in it. And when I do run easy in it, I enjoy the experience, but overall I'm getting a very stabilized sensation. I feel like the rocker is trying to control my foot movement, and I feel like the Astro plate is trying to control my foot movement as well. For some of you, that's going to be music to your ears and you're absolutely gonna love it. But for me, I found that I was fighting with the shoe quite a bit. So while I don't love this shoe, I think that this shoe is going to be perfect for people that are heel strikers and want that plated Nova Blast feeling, or if you've previously not been able to run in Nova Blast because it's been too chaotic, because it's been too squishy. I feel like this is going to finally give you that stabilized Nova Blast feeling that you've been looking for, and you're finally going to be able to enjoy that Nova Blast type sensation. Before we wrap up this video, let's take a moment to zoom out and see where the Sonicblast fits within the very broad ASICS lineup. Now, whenever I start taking a look at a brand, I always like to start with the Daily Trainer, and from ASICS, that is the Nova Blast. This is the original Blast and where the entire Blast family started. It's using FF Blast Max, and it's a very fun and cushioned and bouncy Daily Trainer that I can use for most of my runs for most of the days of the week. When I'm looking for something that's a little bit more cushioned and soft than the Nova Blast though, in the Blast family, the shoe that I would reach for would be the Super Blast version 2. This is using FF Turbo Plus, which is a race caliber foam, but it does have a daily training layer of foam on the bottom. And overall, I get a very soft, cushioned experience from the shoe that I could be in for a long period of time. But because this top layer of foam does have some race pedigree to it, I can also pick up the pace if I wanted to use it, say, on a long run with some marathon effort or tempo type of miles in it. And then if I wanted to go a little bit faster, that's where I would reach for a shoe like the Sonicblast, or at least that's where this is intended to fit. It's intended to fit here as kind of the tempo trainer, not quite as fast as a racing shoe might be, but something that has durability like a daily trainer, but can pick up the pace if you want to use it for some workouts. And then ASICS also has another member in this family, in the Blast family, called the Mega Blast. Now this is using FF Turbo Squared, the same type of foam that's in the top layer of the Sonicblast, but it only has FF Turbo Squared, and it ends up being very lightweight, very bouncy, but also still cushioned. And I would consider this now as the long run shoe in the ASICS lineup. Yes, it can be comfortable for max cushion and recovery run type purposes, but I'm really going to be reaching for this for both easy runs and also long runs where I might have some pace changes and I want to go a little bit faster, but maybe I'm not reaching for my racing shoe quite yet. That's where the Mega Blast fits in. Now, there's also a whole other set of shoes that you might already be familiar with from ASICS, and you're maybe wondering, well, how are those related to the Blast family? So let's move some of these over to this side over here so we could take a look at those shoes. And I think the best place to start from the, I guess, legend shoes from ASICS would be the Cumulus, and this is Cumulus version 27. In addition to having a great daily training foam in them, they also have Pure Gel, which is a material that ASICS puts in some of their shoes, or used to put in a lot more of their shoes, as a way of helping to absorb impact that's coming up from the road. And I put these intentionally across from the Nova Blast because they're intended to serve the same purpose, but they have very different experiences depending on what you like in a shoe. And then if you need more cushion than what the Cumulus has to offer, then you have the Nimbus. This is also Nimbus version 27. It has a similar foam as the Cumulus. It also has some Pure Gel in it, but it's a much taller stack height shoe. It's a much more comfy shoe, and I'd put it against the Superblast 2 as two shoes that serve the same purpose in a lineup, but have very different experiences. And I think another big difference in terms of the way that these functionally operate to me is that the ASICS Nimbus 27 is solely like a max cushion shoe, low and slow. I just want to be nice and comfy, and I don't care about pace. If I do care about pace, then I'd reach for the Superblast 2 or the Mega Blast. And then across from the Sonicblast, that's where the Magic Speed kind of comes in. Now this shoe doesn't have any Pure Gel in it, but it is a plated option for going faster that I think is going to sit better across from the Blast family in terms of what it's going to try and produce going forward. Now currently this shoe has a daily training foam, a carbon fiber plate, and then an insert of FF Turbo, which is a generation behind the FF Turbo that's in the Superblast version 2, but it's a racing caliber foam that there's like a puck of it underneath the forefoot. And so this is intended to be a different kind of plated trainer that's available as an option to you in the ASICS lineup. And so this is kind of the way that I would see kind of the legend shoes like the Cumulus and the Nimbus, and then the plated trainer that goes along with it. And then here is the Blast family of shoes, like starting with the Nova Blast, and then the plated trainer that goes along with it is the Sonicblast. Now let's wrap up the video by going over the buying guide, and we'll also discuss some alternatives. ASICS wanted to give the people what they want and give them the Sonicblast as that Nova Blast with the plate. For some runners, it's going to be that tempo shoe in the Blast family that works for everything from everyday running up to even marathon racing and everything in between. But for me, it doesn't quite work out that way. It disagrees with the way that I like to run and isn't the kind of shoe that I like. So to me, I find that it's pretty much a stabilized Nova Blast. And when we're talking about daily training efforts, I'd rather go with the Nova Blast 5. For people who are mid-foot to forefoot strikers, I think that's going to be the shoe that I recommend that you get, because that shoe comes in at $150, and that's a lot cheaper than the $180 that the Sonicblast is going to go on sale for. And now you might be also asking about that Magic Speed 4. I do feel like that could be an alternative to people, but I feel like the way that the Magic Speed 4 and the way that the Sonicblast are set up, these are intended for different types of runners depending on where your foot is going to be hitting the ground first. I also think that the Sonicblast is much better at daily training than the Magic Speed 4, and the Magic Speed 4 is firmer, but also a bit faster when it comes to picking up the pace. So that's how I'd pretty much decide between these two shoes in terms of what you need. You do save a little bit of money by going to the Magic Speed 4, but it's not a lot because that shoe retails still for $170. Let's also take a look at some of the competition that's out there and see where they stack up. Now, the first shoe that I thought about when I ran in the Sonicblast came from Brooks, and that is the Hyperion Max 3. This shoe also uses a premium foam up top as a daily training foam on the bottom, and it has a plastic plate separating the two. But the Hyperion Max 3 is a Max shoe, so there's just more of everything. And so while I think these two shoes are similar, especially in the aggressive rockers that they have up front, the Hyperion Max 3 is just a lot more of what the Sonicblast has to offer. And in a lot of ways, I think of the Sonicblast as kind of like a Hyperion Max Mini, if that makes sense. So depending on how much shoe and how much rocker you want, that's how we decided between these two shoes. Neither of these shoes is cheap though, because the Hyperion Max 3 comes in at a retail price of $200, which I think is pretty steep. And then the last shoe that I want to talk about is the shoe that I thought about instantly when I ran in the Sonicblast. And that comes from Hoka. This is the Mach X version 2. Now, I feel like these two shoes are perfect analogs in terms of what people thought they were and then what the brands delivered. So the Mach is a daily trainer that I absolutely love from Hoka, and the Mach X seemed like it was supposed to be that kind of faster version of that, even faster than the Mach already is. It has a premium upper layer of foam, it has a daily training lower layer foam, and then it also has a plastic plate in between those two layers. But the Mach X was never really a speedier version of the Mach to me. It was always a stabilized version of the Mach, which for me is just not all that interesting and not all that fun. But for those of you that like the Mach but couldn't handle how squishy it was kind of the perfect everyday tempo training and also sometimes marathon racer for you. Now, the difference in terms of the way these shoes feel underfoot though is that the Mach X is way more firm. There's like almost no softness to it at all, despite how much PBA is in here. So it's a much more responsive foam. It's a much pingier foam. You're really kind of like slapping the ground with it. So there's a very different feel both in the midsole foam and in how tight this upper is. You might need to size up on it, but I think that these are analogs. If we were studying for the SATs, I would say the Mach X is to the Mach as the Sonicblast is to the Novablast. And that's how I would understand those shoes. Deciding between those two depends on how firm of an experience you want. The price on this one is a lot cheaper though, because even though it originally retailed at $190, which I think was a lot for what this shoe is, it's now available on sale for $151, which finally makes it, in my mind, something that more people should consider. So those are my thoughts on the Sonicblast. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions about this shoe or any of the shoes that I talked about today, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to see you guys over there in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?